Someone told me about it, how people cry. Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? There's no bother trying to find him. He's not there. Well, let me tell you about the way he looks, the way he acts, and the color of his hair. His voice is soft and good, his eyes are clear and bright, but he's not there.
Welcome back again. I'm Dave Tubman, the author of the book Jimmy Hoffa Is Missing-The Gap. And I waited a little bit so that that last video of Francis Tubman sunk in and people had a chance to view it. I'll be posting up the free link to the archive book so you can follow along if you'd like. This is blog number 12, so that's chapter 7. And we're going to deal with the alibi. Namely Chucky O'Brien's alibi that he gave the FBI during his 2 interviews that they conducted with him after they called him back to Detroit. He left the Sunday after Hoffa disappeared and went back to West Memphis, Arkansas to be with his bride, Brenda Goldsmith, who he had married just a month prior in June of 1975. So when he left town, though, people thought he disappeared, and I guess the facts of that was revealed in the book by his stepson, Jack Goldsmith, in Hoffa's Shadow. That was published in September of 2019. But anyway, a lot of this information that I've garnered was from the Hoffa memo. It's a very large, extensive file that starts off listing the cast of characters in the first several pages. Then it gets into the interviews it conducted with Chucky O'Brien. Before I go any further, though, please like, subscribe, share, follow this blog. I guarantee you won't get this information from a lot of the other Hoffa experts. I took my parents' eyewitness testimony and went outward from there and found research that corroborated, added to, and I think you'll find that you can kind of web the answers of what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa from all the evidence that we'll present. This is chapter 7, page 109. So we're going to talk about the agenda that O'Brien had that day and where he claims he went, and a lot of it just doesn't make sense. We're going to talk about that coho salmon that was delivered and why he felt he needed to cancel everything that was important to him, but he had to deliver that fish to Robert Holmes Sr. out in Farmington Hills. And we're also going to talk more about the mercury itself. And so let's dig in. So on the page across from the first page of chapter 7, there's several photographs I've collaged with Chuck O'Brien as he appeared on September 3rd, 1975 at the Detroit grand jury with his attorney James Burdick. Did buy the rights from Wayne State University. Then there's the mercury below that, and in case you didn't know some of the side story that had to do with Jack's car wash, it wasn't until September that his attorney provided this so-called evidence that Chucky O'Brien went to Jack's car wash that day, and this is a handwritten, signed credit card slip proving that O'Brien was at Jack's car wash that day. It wasn't dated or stamped as far as punched. It was handwritten, and actually the person who signed it claims she did not see O'Brien at Jack's car wash on that particular day, July 30th, 1975. But it took several months for the attorney to produce some sort of evidence that he did go there that day as he claimed. This fish, again, took different sizes, and it started out as 16 pounds, went to 24 pounds, I believe, and then up to 40 pounds by the time Chucky O'Brien delivered it to Robert Holmes that afternoon. It was just gushing, gallons of fish blood, apparently, according to him. I do tend to believe that he did deliver a fish that day, or it was in the mercury at one time. I will discuss in the next chapter more about Jack's Car Wash and some new evidence that I discovered by talking to the current owner, the son of Jack Millen, who founded Jack's Car Wash. And this was located Grand River and Orchard Lake Road out in Farmington Hills. It's now a new owner, so they don't own that car wash any longer, but it is still there. So anyway, and then of course the back seat. You can see how roomy that is, that little a place where the drivetrain went through, the hump in the back seat on the floorboard. I would envision that if Hoffa sat on behind the driver, that he was probably pulled down head first, facing the opposite direction, maybe butt up, and straddled that hump, while the man in the front seat had hopped through that large opening separating the front seat backs, to assist the other man in the back seat holding Hoffa down on the floorboard. And as Frances Tubman testified, she saw two large men with their knees up in their chest, up into their chin, and forcing something down on the floorboard. So that really shows how that car would have accommodated the four men and the activity that could have happened in that car that day. And it was a more inviting vehicle than the station wagon, the Union station wagon that Chucky O'Brien claims the keys were lost and he couldn't take it that day. Just so you know that O'Brien was not named in this report of Hoffa's missing for several days, almost a week later, the 5th or the 6th of August. I believe it was the 6th that they had called O'Brien back to talk to them about his whereabouts. They had also, during that time, been informed of a witness that saw O'Brien in the Mercury. And that's how they were able to trace the maroon Mercury, which is a pretty unique car and color and everything, to Joey Giacalone. So they put two and two together. That's how that's how O'Brien became a suspect to begin with. And of course, there's those that have claimed that O'Brien just was either unwittingly involved or he wasn't involved. He couldn't have been. Hoffa wouldn't have gotten in the car. I think you'll find the consensus of all the FBI investigations that not only did they believe he drove the car when they did it finally impounded on August 9th from Joey Giacalone's apartment, where Tony Giacalone, his father, was at the time. I think it was at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was early morning when they showed up. They found a shotgun in the trunk. Tony Giacalone was on the balcony as they were hooking up the car, saying, "Can I have my golf clubs out of the trunk?" And it turned out it was a shotgun with shotgun shells and other rounds of ammo, I guess, there and in the glove compartment, and a empty holster, handgun holster underneath the front seat. They did have a piece of paper and also 7-Up bottle with Chucky O'Brien's fingerprints on it. So there was proof O'Brien was actually in the car. They also extracted a 3-inch long hair, which they examined, and it appeared to be Hoffa's, but it wasn't until 2001 when DNA was used in court cases, and they determined it was definitely his hair with traces of skin and blood on it. When they impounded the car, they did run 3 teams of dogs, or 3 scent dogs specialists from different parts of the country that traced a strong presence of Hoffa's scent in the back seat compartment. They believe they had less reaction from the dogs in the trunk, so they don't believe his body was ever placed in the trunk. And they don't believe that Hoffa was actually killed in the car, or there would have been more evidence, fluid evidence, body fluids. So I think that's pretty strong, indications from the evidence that the FBI extracted from the vehicle itself. Since I do reference the Hoffa memo, as I said, I'm going to post up. There's several sites actually, but I know you can download a free version of it at the PBS, Detroit Free Press, if you were to search Hoffa Memo, Detroit Free Press, you'll run across it, but I'll give you the link anyway during this video. Okay, so the Hoffa Memo, just so you know, was not discovered until 1985, and was discovered by, I believe it was workers that were going through an abandoned recreation building in the city of Detroit, and they were removing a file cabinet, and at the very bottom of this file cabinet were these unprotected files, a Hoffa Memo, unredacted, and they were the FBI's notes from January 27th and 28th of 1976, and that they were putting together kind of a discussion amongst the agents about what they had accumulated in evidence, interviews, and whatnot for the Hoffa case. And once more, if you just for some reason don't believe Chucky O'Brien drove that car that day, even he admitted to driving the car. Joey Giacalone said he drove the car. A witness came to the FBI after the disappearance, before they found out Chucky O'Brien was driving, that told him he was seen in the car at the Marcus Red Fox in that Mercury, maroon Mercury. So everything points to he drove the car. I'm convinced of that myself. You know, there's so much to Chucky O'Brien's involvement in this that I think even his stepson, Jack Goldsmith, refers to him as a pathological liar, and that he was withholding truth when he interviewed him over several months or years even, preparing for the book that he eventually put out, the Ian Hoffa's Shadow Book. And so the fact he is a pathological liar, I mean, you can see there's a few interviews of him on video from old news telecasts that indicate he was no buffoon. He was pretty intelligent. His morals were all about whatever made him look good. He would never admit to anything of wrongdoing. But his involvement with Jimmy Hoffa was still strong, even though they had a falling out because he was dating a dance hall girl, Brenda Goldsmith, from West Memphis, and that James P. Hoffa had indicated that at least 8 times Jimmy Hoffa had tried to make amends with Chucky O'Brien before the event, and just didn't get a return phone call, so it never happened. But he was inclined to get in the car. Like I said, and that was the most inviting vehicle I guess you could put out in front of him, with just the right people. It's long suspected that Sal Bergoglio was in the car, which would have made sense, a New Jersey assistant to Tony Provenzano. Could have been Vito Giacalone as well, and of course he was in on setting up the meeting. Tony Giacalone's brother, and also street boss in Detroit. And of course Chucky O'Brien was always involved between the Giacalones and Hoffa in meetings and whatever. So the main characters, I believe, are Vito Giacalone, Sal Bergoglio, and Chucky O'Brien, along with Hoffa. When the Hoffa Memo did come to light, it was turned over to David Ashenfelter from the Detroit News / Detroit Free Press. They were one and the same. They did used to be separate newspapers, but they merged. I used to deliver for the Detroit News, and then when I was 11, 12 years old, and then it merged with the Detroit Free Press and became one combined newspaper. So the Gap is primarily, although there's 90 minutes that the FBI said Chucky O'Brien could not account for, I'm going to kind of discount the obvious travel time between 3:30 and 4. I believe he was not spotted until 4:30 because Joey Giacalone said he didn't show up there until at least 4. They chatted for a bit and then went back to the local 299. So that puts it at 4:30. So from 2:30 to 4:30 is 2 hours. But the FBI allowed for 30 minutes. So from 2:30 to 4 is what they believe he just did not have the right answers to. Even before that, though, there was a lot of ambiguity, conflicting accounts. So this agenda that Chucky O'Brien that I presented earlier was based on his claims, but there's other evidence in the Hoffa memo that suggests otherwise. So on page 110, I mentioned there's 3 sections we're going to cover. O'Brien's agenda from July 29th to August 6th, 1975, the 16-pound salmon, and the 1975 Mercury Marquis Brome. O'Brien's agenda from July 29th to August 6th is covered on page 21 through 31 of the Hoffa memo. It kind of details 2 interviews on August 6th and August 18th with Chucky O'Brien. July 29th, this is the day before Hoffa was abducted. O'Brien claims, I have an asterisk next to each one of these items because they're suspect as far as being true or not. So he says, O'Brien says he went to dinner with the Adells. Mrs. Adele said that he didn't go to dinner with them the day before Hoffa disappeared. This is Tuesday. So O'Brien recanted. He said, no, he didn't go to dinner with the Adells. Then he said he really went to the Meadowbrook Country Club with Joe Franco. Then he said he was dropped off at the Adells at 5 o'clock. And William Rogers said he saw O'Brien at Meadowbrook between 8 and 10 p.m. This is the 29th. O'Brien calls Tony Giacalone at night, and he was at his son Joey Giacalone's apartment in St. Clair Shores. And everything that I had as an asterisk was either recanted or changed by O'Brien or disputed by others. So he retracted all of those items. So you have to kind of figure that, of course, it's the day before, so it's not as intricate and important detail as what actually happened on the 30th, but it does indicate that he was trying to cover his time. There's a lot of reports that say every day he was in Detroit before going back to West Memphis on that Sunday, August 3rd. He spent a lot of time calling and contacting and being with Tony Giacalone twice on the 30th. So the night of the 30th, I believe he was also supposedly with Uncle Tony Giacalone. Then we come to Wednesday, July 30th, the day of Hoffa's disappearance. At 1 o'clock, Holmes, Chucky O'Brien supposedly arrives at the Holmes residence, and he makes 2 calls from the Holmes residence while he's there. He calls Tony Giacalone, who's at the Southfield Athletic Club, and Tony was busy. He was getting a rub down, so he didn't receive the call. Then he called and left a message for Marvin Adele, who he was living with. Adele had a home that was nearby the Marcus Red Fox, which made sense because that's where Chucky O'Brien was dropped off every morning and picked up every evening. He got rides from Robert Holmes Jr. To 299 and then would get a ride from someone else back from Union in the evening. So he calls Tony G. Marvin Adele leaves a message. Now, previously in an interview, he said that he had given 12:30 p.m. as his arrival at Holmes. That's a full half an hour before the second time he mentioned. And he had already said that he left the Holmes residence at 1:15 to 1:30. So that was, I put an asterisk next to that because that conflicts with his 2 o'clock time later, or 2:30, that he says he left the Holmes and went to the Jack's Car Wash. Incidentally, if you do any searching for Jack's, it's Jaxkarwash. That's how you'll find out. They actually have some nice information about Jack's Car Wash on their website. Bruce Malin is the son of Jack Malin, the original founder, but I got to speak to him. I was just trying to confirm that I could use, I guess, a dated logo of Jack's Car Wash, because I was going to talk about it. Chapter 8 deals with Jack's Car Wash. And based on his information and his own family secret, he said, I'll talk about that in the next chapter. So he visits with Vi Holmes. He said he was running late for his meeting with Tony at the Southfield Athletic Club. That was at 2:20. Again, these all have asterisks next to them because they were changed or challenged. 2:15, he said he arrived at Jack's Car Wash, got gas first, and then car wash after. At 2:40, he said he left Jack's Car Wash. Then he said at 1:45, this is an alternate arrival time he gave, and an alternate departure time was 2 o'clock. So he either arrived at 1:45 and left at 2, or I guess it gave him a smaller window of opportunity to have abducted Hoffa if he said he didn't leave until 2:40. I mean, that's past the time that Hoffa presumably left the Red Fox. So let's see. He had a whole week to come up with information, I guess, to cover his tracks that day, but he really was all over the place. So here at 2:55, first he said he arrived at the Southfield Athletic Club, but he didn't go in. He said he got $200 bills from Tony Giacalone as a graduation gift, and for the grandsons, I guess. And the receptionist said O'Brien was not there that day. Then he admitted he did not go inside and said he met with Tony outside the club. Then again, he said he met Tony in the hallway before his haircut, Tony Giacalone's haircut. And then he said he met him after his haircut. So at 3:15, he says he left Southfield Athletic Club. This is well after Hoffa would have been abducted. 2:30, he changed it again. He said his departure from Southfield Athletic Club was at 2:30. Then at 3:10, he changed it again. He said he arrived at Joey Giacalone's work and chatted for about 10 minutes. Then he said at 3:35 he was dropped off at Trumbull at 299. The receptionist was gone. She said she usually gets off at 4:30, and she said in the Hoffa's memo she did not witness Chuck O'Brien arriving. Then at 5 o'clock from 299, Chucky O'Brien gets a ride from Joey Valenti to Jack's Car Wash in Farmington Hills. Not the Red Fox, where he normally gets dropped off in the evening, because that's closest to the Adells where he stayed. The only thing that kind of, in hindsight, makes sense is that could have been the occasion when he got gas, if he got gas. But we don't know. We just don't know. It's just you're scratching your head. Why would he be dropped off at Jack's Car Wash, which is 20 minutes away from the Red Fox? And then at 6:10, Valenti O'Brien get to the car wash, and Adele arrives to pick up O'Brien and gets his own car washed, and then goes home at Jack's Car Wash. And then at 7:30 p.m., O'Brien said he went to dinner with the Adells to the Rickshaw restaurant. This is July 30th, that Wednesday. But Miss Adele said O'Brien didn't go with him to dinner. Then he said he called his wife Brenda in West Memphis, Arkansas, and everything with an asterisk, like I mentioned before, is either disputed or retracted by O'Brien himself. So I know you didn't make sense of all this. There's no way you can. So on page 114, I do have a section called Author's Notes, and I do point out a few things. I'll go ahead and point them out here. So regarding Holmes, he said he arrived at 1 and left at 1:20. The next time, it's an hour later, And using the most favorable timeline, giving O'Brien the benefit of the doubt, he still ends up with 60 or 90 minutes unaccounted for, from 2:40 to 4 o'clock.